After spending a very wonderful 3 weeks travelling around Europe with my family, it was time to break off on my own and begin the mostly solo aspect of my travel journey, with the first stop being the incredible Spanish island of Mallorca. I've spent the past almost 2 weeks revelling in the late spring sunshine, exploring beaches, mountains and towns cradling the two together, mostly in my own company but also with new friends that started off as chance encounters. Of course, but also a little bit unexpectedly for me, the feelings of joy and awe have also at times been paired with the harder feelings of disorientation and homesickness as I adjust to new environments and new routines. And as my time here kind of comes to an end for now, I wanted to kind of wrap it all up in this video, almost like a travel diary but rose bud thorn style. One of my friends introduced me to this concept many years ago, and it's kind of like acknowledging the time that's passed and all that's happened within it, where rose would be your highlights, bud would be kind of like something interesting or something that you've learned, and thorn would be the more negative parts, which are oftentimes important to recognize as well. So here is all that in terms of my time spent on Mallorca. This island is truly so beautiful, and I think I did a pretty damn good job of exploring as much as I could in the time that I did have here. Though it's still a little cold at this time of the year in May, the water was just so exquisitely blue and inviting that I was finding myself wanting to be in or around it every single day, which was really easy and almost inevitable considering how many different colours there were on this island. My favourite landscapes are the kind where the ocean meets the mountains, so I was very happy being able to do some trekking and exploring of the little towns that are in the mountains, and also spend some time at the beach all in the same day. The island always felt super safe to me, even when walking around the city at night, and I do think it's a great destination for solo travellers. Getting around is pretty straightforward and the public transport system is pretty good, but if you are not on as much of a budget, or if you are travelling with a group of people, I definitely would recommend renting a car because it would just make your life so much easier, and it would definitely make it a little bit easier to get to those harder to access beaches, but it's still not impossible. You just kind of have to pick where you want to go. And if you're looking for recommendations, these were some of my favourite spots, or spots that I would suggest visiting as well. So I didn't stay in the Palma city centre like most people do when they visit Mallorca, but I actually stayed up north on the island, but not in a B&B or a hostel or a hotel or anything like that. I actually did a Workaway with a family, and if you've never heard of Workaway, it's basically like a work exchange kind of system or website where a host will offer up accommodation and oftentimes food as well in exchange for a few hours of work a few days a week from the person that they're hosting. There's all kind of different jobs you can do depending on what skills you have or what you kind of want to do, but I ended up doing a little bit of babysitting and a little bit of help around the house, so nothing crazy at all. In exchange, I got accommodation of course, but also lunch and dinner when I was nearby. Workaway is a huge game changer if you're on a budget, because once your main expenses of accommodation and food are kind of taken care of, you really don't have to spend that much money at all to be able to travel, and you kind of feel a bit more flexible, and you also kind of feel like you have a bit more of a sense of purpose when you're traveling as well. Also, of course, depending on what you're doing and where you're staying, I feel like you can learn a lot more and just immerse yourself a bit more in kind of the local cultures and lifestyle than you would if you were just staying in a hostel. This is also partly because you do tend to stay in places longer when you do a Workaway. Mine is just under 2 weeks, which is still considered quite short because often hosts will want you to stay for about a month, but for me it was definitely still a slower kind of travel instead of jumping from city to city every few days, which honestly, after catching so many flights so quickly, was quite nice, and it was just comforting to know that I could make my way back home wherever I was on the island, and knowing that I didn't have to rush anywhere and that I could see places again if I wanted to, because I did have the time to do that as well. The only thing I struggled with a little bit was my lack of Spanish speaking, and not just Spanish but Catalan as well, which most people speak here too. I did try to learn a little bit of Spanish before I came, and I do have a video up on my channel about it, but obviously you can't learn a whole language by yourself in just a few months, and it's also really different speaking to native speakers who obviously speak a lot faster and use words that you might not know yet. It was really nice to be surrounded by that though, and I feel like the more you kind of expose yourself to a language, the faster that you're going to learn, and if anything else, this trip has definitely motivated me to keep learning and keep getting better. This wasn't really even a problem though, and I did immediately feel really welcomed in to the family who did of course speak English, and I am going to miss them, and I'm so grateful that I was able to have this experience. And I definitely would recommend this type of travel if you are wanting to stay in one place a little bit longer or to learn or use specific skills. I have solo travelled before, and I know that while most days tend to be great, I definitely do remember feeling a bit funny some days and feeling those feelings of homesickness creep up on you. So I was expecting these feelings to come up at some point, but not as quickly and as strongly as they did. On the first full day I spent in Mallorca, I felt really homesick and just disorientated and confused and questioning why I was even doing this whole travel thing by myself in the first place, and I just wanted to go home, and I just didn't really know what to do with myself. It was just all really overwhelming all of a sudden, especially since on the plane ride here I had been really excited and ready, only to become and met with all these like negative thoughts flowing through my brain. It also really didn't help that it was a rainy and grey and gloomy day. I think I did just get used to having my family around, so knowing that all of a sudden I was all by myself and so far from home was a lot to kind of take in at once. But I took myself for a walk and made a plan to kind of help me feel a little bit more settled, and by that evening, after I had probably met the Workaway family and had a shower, I was already feeling so much better. I just thought this was something that I had to mention too, because solo travel can be so hard and scary and nerve-wracking, and I think that everyone, no matter how much you have travelled or how comfortable you are with being in your own company, will feel like this at some point as well. It definitely shouldn't discourage you from taking that leap and taking that trip, but I do think it's something that you need to be aware of and kind of prepare yourself to feel a little bit if you are wanting to travel by yourself. That just because you have a hard day doesn't immediately mean that your trip is ruined and you have to book the next flight home. And I'm just thinking now, and of course I wouldn't have booked that flight on the first day, but if I had listened to those nerves and if I had listened to everything that I was feeling on that first day, I would have missed all of the other amazing days that I've had so far on this trip. So here's what I kind of listened to instead. A remedy to homesickness, if you will. It worked for me, and maybe it'll work for you too. You almost always feel better after your body feels well rested. Get your solid 8 hours of good, decent sleep. Go for a long walk around where you're staying and just explore. An hour of movement with some good tunes can really shift your headspace. Call your favorite people and ask them about their life and tell them about yours and how you're feeling. Just listen to their voice and let it remind you that just because you're not right next to each other or in the same country doesn't mean that the love still isn't shared between you both. Obviously not applicable if you're inland, but being in the sun by the beach for a few hours can truly be magic, especially if accompanied by some fruit and your journal or a good book. No matter how introverted or extroverted you are, we all need human connection on a daily basis. Even just a small conversation with a kind stranger on a bus one day really made a big difference in my mood, and even more so when I made a friend and was able to spend a few really fun days with her together. Having a plan gets you feeling really excited and confident about your next moves, and as fun as it is to kind of go with the flow at times, it is also important to kind of have a bit of a direction in which way you want the flow to go. We are creatures of comfort and we do feel homesick for a reason, so I do think it's important to acknowledge when we are feeling uneasy, but you can do this without letting those feelings totally consume you and turning it into a big problem within yourself. It's so normal to feel a little bit homesick while you're traveling, and this is a reminder to myself as well. Thank you so much if you've made it to this point of the video. The past few videos that I've uploaded have been really short. I know it's because we were moving so quickly and through so many places with my family that I didn't really have the time or the motivation to be filming and editing all the time. So hopefully you've enjoyed this kind of longer, more chatty one. It is a little bit different, but it kind of covers all the ranges of the experience I've had here in Mallorca, and I think that it just wouldn't be what I wanted it to be if I just kind of vlogged today and showed you all the wonderful parts, because there's obviously so much more that is happening in and around those days. See you in another part of the world and another video very soon.